Hey agents, welcome back to the Center for the Blind. In this video, I want to take a look at the world famous, often imitated, never duplicated, unanimously best in slot Contractor's gloves and Fox's prayer knee pads. It seems to be widely accepted that every DPS build should include these two named items in order to get the maximum damage. In case you don't know, Contractor's gloves are the named Petrov Defense Group gloves that come with 8% damage to armor, and Fox's prayer knee pads are the named Overlord Armaments knee pads that come with 8% damage to targets out of cover. Because damage to armor and damage to targets out of cover are both multiplicative sources of damage, both of these pieces are very strong even if you're not running an LMG or rifle. But how strong are they really? I decided to test this using 3 different builds. For the record, I didn't test this expecting to prove that they weren't best in slot, but to see if there are in fact times when Fox's Prayer or Contractors are not ideal options on a DPS build. The first build that I tested was a standard DPS build. Some people might swap in a piece or two, but for testing purposes, it's all the same. Anyways, to start, I used Fox's Prayer and Contractors. With the Coyote Mask, we're at 60% critical hit chance, and how we're going to calculate this is take the damage from a crit and non-crit. We'll multiply the crit by 60% and non-crit by 40%, then add them together, and there's our average damage number. Simple enough. So with Contractors and Foxes, our crit is 486k, and our non-crit is 168k. Punch these numbers into the calculator, and we get an average of 348k. To compare, I've swapped out Contractors and Foxes for 2 pieces of Walker Harris, which gives us 5% weapon damage and 5% damage to armor, instead of the LMG damage and rifle damage that we aren't making any use of since we're using an AR. Our numbers with Walker Harris are 433,000 and 156,000, giving us an average of 322k, a drop off of about 26,000 damage. So in this particular situation, we can definitely give the advantage to Fox's Prayer and Contractors. Next up is a less conventional build, a hazard protection build. This is basically 90% Hasbro, meaning there are fewer attributes and bonuses to dedicate to crit, so we only get this build to 54% crit chance. Our numbers are 204 and 104k for an average of 158,000 damage per bullet. This time we swap to Fenris. Don't worry about the attributes, one is 12% crit damage, and the other is a non-damage attribute to replace the Hasbro. So when we swapped out the Fox's Prayer knee pads, we got an average damage of 162,000, and swapping Fenris in for Contractors gave us 160,000. Very similar numbers when swapping out the gloves and knee pads, both of them being higher than the Fox's Contractors combo. Not at all surprising for me when you consider you're giving up 8% damage to armor or damage to targets out of cover for 10% AR damage and 12% crit damage. Finally, I tested with the gear set System Corruption. Now with this build, we're running headshot damage instead of crit. As the Bighorn doesn't have damage to targets out of cover, you'll get the exact same numbers from Contractors and Fox's Prayer. With one piece Hadsberg, with headshot damage and handling as the attributes, we got 306k on headshots and 97k on the body. Not too concerned about the body shot numbers though, as the vast majority of your damage will come through headies. Then we swapped the Hadsberg piece for Contractors with headshot damage. On headshots we hit for 314k and bodies 104. Not surprisingly, we're hitting harder with the Contractors gloves, but we are losing 8% handling. So it's up to you whether you'd prefer a damage increase of 2.6% on headshots or 8% handling. For me, using the Bighorn, which has pretty wild recoil, I prefer the handling, but with something like a Carbine or Police M4, you may not need the handling, thus you would be better off running the Contractors gloves or Fox's Prayer knee pads. So in the end, did I prove that Contractors and Foxes are overrated? Not at all. They are indeed best in slot for specific builds. On a standard high-end DPS build, yes, go with them. But with kind of off-meta builds, there are more variables to consider, and often there's a better choice that will provide more stats when you consider the brand set bonuses and attributes. But that's it. If you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and go ahead and subscribe if you want lots more Division 2 content in the near future. See you in the next video. Happy farming, agents.